Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? We're closing out this summer of me rereading some books that I've really enjoyed by rereading The Lost World. Much like Jurassic Park, this is the first time since the late 90s that I've read this book. I just backburnered it because I read it so many times in quick succession, in seventh and eighth grade, that I felt like I got it out of my system without really considering that I had only understood it at my 13-year-old self's level, that here was this cool story about dinosaurs and a few other things that I could wrap my head around. But now reading it in the context of my adult life and other things that I have come to understand and so on and so forth, I have a greater appreciation for just how much Crichton was able to weave together to tell this story. If Jurassic Park was a warning against the abuse of a power that we did not understand, namely genetic power, comparing it to the unlocking of the atom in the 1940s, then The Lost World is it's a caution against changes in intelligent behavior that contribute to or lead to extinction, among other things. Um, the quest of the main two scientists in this book, Malcolm and Levine, is to try to figure out how to study extinction as a phenomenon. It's not the kind of thing that you can really put into a lab and watch up close or examine it so much in the wild. You can theorize about it, and you can draw from evidence that is observable to then back up your thesis. But it's one of those things that's hard to accurately and objectively watch in real time and say, here's how this thing went extinct. In fact, Malcolm and Levine have big discussions about this a couple of times in the book. If I were to sit down and again read this in print, because I did the audio, I grabbed it from Audible. Scott Brick did this narration. If I were to read it in print and take notes, I could spin half a dozen essays and videos out of this thing, just sharing the deeper thoughts that I had on this reread. Again, I have so much a greater. Gosh, sorry, my brain is cooked. It's hot again today. I have so much of a greater appreciation for Crichton's intellect and his skill as a storyteller when I reread his bangers from 30 years ago. The story of this, the story here, it's different from the way that it was told in the movie. The movie is a very loose adaptation. We'll get to that in a minute. The story of the book is that Malcolm did actually survive. If you remember at the end of Jurassic Park, he was declared dead, but he had an off-screen death. And the first sentence of this one is basically like, yeah, Ian Malcolm was not actually dead. He's challenged by another scientist named Richard Levine, a colleague, an associate of his, but somebody that he doesn't really like. Although he respects that the man has an intellect, he's also got a couple of other less than admirable qualities. He's a rich trust fund kid, and he's kind of a loose cannon, and everybody who knows him takes him as being just abrasive and unlikable. But he's driven to get results when he's looking for evidence to back up his theses and his claims. And he starts to get word that there are dinosaurs dying and washing up around the islands of Costa Rica, amongst other places. And he wants to go find them and observe them in their natural habitat and then study extinction, again, among other things. And since there are rumors abounding that Malcolm has made contact with these animals and such, like he wants to consult Malcolm on it and get his 2 cents, and Malcolm wants nothing to do with it, but ultimately he's like, well, if I find the place where these dinosaurs are, then will you come with me and check it out? And Malcolm's like, all right, fine, whatever. And leaves it at that. Well, 18 months go by, and Levine has used his trust fund to hire an engineer to build a bunch of vehicles for him. I'm going to reference the movie here again. If you saw the two RVs that they had together on the accordion connector with all the fancy tech involved, integrated into them, those were in the book. The character of Eddie Carr was in the book, but he was kind of a junior agent to a guy named Doc Thorne, who was the major engineer for the story. There were 2 teenage kids in this one, kind of like there were 2 kids in the last one, but Tim and Lex don't show up again. Neither do Grant and Sattler. They get a mention, but they don't feature in this story. The teens in this book are Kelly and Arby. Kelly's a white girl, Arby's a black kid. They're both smart, and they're both ambitious and driven with the sciences. And Richard Levine happens to be their substitute teacher at their middle school. He's got to do community service because he was speeding and doing like 120 and a 30 or something in his Ferrari. Like, his car got impounded, his license got suspended, and he has to do community service. But that's how the kids end up getting to know Dr. Levine, and they know that he's building these vehicles, and they want to go field test them with him, and so they sneak into the vehicles when the team goes out to the dinosaur island, and obviously this ends up becoming a mistake, and there it is. They combined these 2 kids for the movie to create a black girl named Kelly, and also had her be Malcolm's daughter. Like I said, the movie, and I'm going to reference this a couple of times, the movie is just kind of a pastiche of the book. The book was, oh gosh, it was so much cooler. Dodgson also comes back. He's coming to the island around the same time. He wants to go there and steal dinosaur eggs because he's not a guy who's good at doing original research. He's good at stealing other people's research and doing other things with it. He's just a skis. It backfires and he gets his comeuppance. But much like the first one, the story is about scientists trying to escape an island full of dinosaurs and learning valuable things along the way. And you get a couple of monologues here and there, and some soliloquies about different facets of science that are very entertaining to read. And then ultimately they succeed in getting off the island. After I saw Jurassic World Rebirth, the 7th Jurassic movie this summer, and then I read Jurassic Park, I realized that the scene with them inflating the raft in front of a sleeping T-Rex, I'd forgotten that was a scene in the first book. And the scene at the end of the movie where they're exploring an abandoned workers' village powered by geothermal heat, and there's a convenience store and there are dinosaurs and blah, blah, blah. That was cribbed very heavily from the ending of Lost World. For whatever other flaws the Jurassic sequels have had, especially this most recent one, was an exercise in creators trying to go back to the source material and at least show things that the original readers enjoyed in the first books, in the only books, and integrating them into the film, saying, like, hey, here's what this scene would look like. There's something that I admire about that. Ultimately, Malcolm and Levine, and I won't say who else survives, they get off the island and you learn stuff along the way. Another thing that I had a great amount of appreciation for was the number of random monologues and asides that Malcolm had talking about how societies don't really scale. And again, this is where you get into the analysis of how intelligent life and its behavior can ultimately contribute to the extinction of large-scale environments and societies. So if you have 3 people on a team, you can get something done. If you have 10, it becomes harder. If you have 30, it becomes extremely difficult. If you have 100, it becomes impossible. And this is back when the population of the Earth was measured around 5 billion people, and that was within my lifetime. The growth rate is accelerating drastically. And considering that observation, it's not all that surprising to see the world in the state that it's in. But I digress. Well, as the story progresses, Malcolm gets injured and he takes some morphine to numb his pain. He's still dealing with an injury from the first book. And there's a scene where Sarah Harding and the other characters find him while he's on one of these morphine trips, and he's singing a post-Civil War song, We'll All Go Down to Dixie. When I was 12, I didn't understand the significance of that song. I thought, okay, Crichton's just got Malcolm high and mumbling. The main thrust of that song is it's a Union song talking about how we're going to go thrash the Confederacy and whip them into obedience. And it's not the chorus, but one of the repeated refrains is each Dixie boy must understand that he must mind his Uncle Sam. It's a story about whipping large numbers of people into obedience and organization. And this song, very ironically, was about the most turbulent conflict that this country has ever had with itself in its brief history. It is a perfectly fitting microcosm of the exact phenomenon Ian Malcolm was talking about during his brief bouts of sobriety, we'll say, in the latter part of this book. But it was an ingenious inclusion that readers with contextual appreciation would understand. Again, it's just one of a million things that I thought about when I was reading this book again for the first time after all these decades. Final note that I want to say is if we're comparing the casting choices for the movies to the way that the characters were written in the book, I think the casting of Julianne Moore to play Sarah Harding was a bit of a miss. Kind of in the same way that casting Julianne Moore to play President Coin in Mockingjay was also a miss. Julianne Moore she always comes off as very warm and very welcoming, mature, but at the same time very girl next door. And President Coin in Mockingjay needed to be off-putting. I always envisioned her more as a Jodie Foster kind of character, not a Julianne Moore kind of character. If I were to cast somebody to play Sarah Harding now, it would be somewhere between Gina Carano and Emily Blunt. Especially Emily Blunt's character from Sicario, only instead of being a Fed, she's a wildlife scientist. I can't remember exactly what type of behavioral biologist she was or whatever, but she was used to roughing it on the African savannas. She was tough. She was rugged. She and Kelly have to get on an electric motorcycle and chase down raptors with a Lindstrat rifle. She's a badass. And while Julianne Moore's iteration of that character had some cool moments in the movie, Sarah Harding in the book was way cooler. Kind of like Muldoon in the first book. Isn't Muldoon in the movie, he gets snuck up on by a raptor and gets killed, whereas Muldoon in the book, he's blowing up raptors with a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher. These books are freaking brilliant. You should definitely read them. Even if you have, read them again. The audiobooks narrated by Scott Brick are just fine. He's not my favorite narrator. There are times when he's slightly below the average mark, but he does a good job here. They're great books, and I will read them again numerous times in my life. Content warning, this one has a lot more profanity than Jurassic Park did, including the naughty word, so be advised on that. And as far as action and violence and whatnot, a direct and faithful adaptation of these books to film would be rated R for the dinosaur carnage, so be advised. Anyway, love this book. Thanks, guys. Drive safe. See you out there.